Hey, welcome back, AP gang. AP Microeconomics Review. Once again, Mr. Pedlow from Chelsea, Michigan, and Chelsea High School. Today, lots to do. It's a really big day. Make sure you guys have something to write on, probably a notebook. If you have your old econ notebook, maybe you follow along and see, your teacher probably taught you guys exactly what we're going to talk about. So for you guys, it'll probably be some review. For some of you who maybe didn't get there all the way, today is important. So remember, your free response this year, this unit 5 that we're doing 5.3 and 5.4 today. And this could certainly be part of a free response question. So today we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what explanations would look like, what you would say, why things look the way they do. So let's climb on into this, start unpacking all this. There's 3 main things we're going to learn today, okay? And the first is we're going to look at how firms find wages. So the reason I drew this chart, because it's much nicer than my handwriting. So go ahead and draw on the left side. These are side-by-side graphs going back, if you remember your market structure things you guys did. So you have wage rate, quantity of labor, and look, for the firm, wage rate, quantity of labor, right? Very good. So just like in market structure, you have price and quantity for both. So we're going to keep them the same for both. And then when it gets to wage rate, a lowercase w is fine, and then Q, or quantity of labor, a big Q, little L next to it would be fine. So in the marketplace, remember, once again, markets, right? X's, so supply and demand. So this is what we spent time yesterday talking about. Now here's the deal. This is kind of smart if you're not watching this live and you're watching it taped. So you're not, it's 3:01 in the afternoon on Thursday. When we get to the free response, if you want to pause it and then do the free response and then unpause it, today I'm going to do 3 free response along with you guys. So if you're watching it taped, you don't have to worry about like, well, why is he doing it? I want to take my own time. Just pause it. For those of you who are live, the reason I'm doing it with you is I'm always going to give you a few seconds to think like, would this be the right answer? Would that be the right answer? But I also want to get through as much today as we can. And I'm not going to say to you, hey, go do 5 free response by tomorrow at 3. So you are going to have 2 free response. One's kind of quick and easy, and we'll go over that tomorrow. And then tomorrow, we're going all the way back. You're going to like tomorrow. We get to talk all about scarcity and opportunity cost and that good stuff. So if you're live, let's roll. So you got wage rate, quantity of labor. Yesterday, we spent time talking about the market. You are the supply of labor. The quantity increases at higher wages. We are willing to work more hours. More of us are willing to work those hours at higher wages. Firms demand the labor, and obviously low quantity at high wages. As wages fall, firms would love to pay us $3 an hour. They'd hire a lot of us, type thing. Okay. Equilibrium is retrayer, allocatively efficient. So this is the wage set in the marketplace. Make your dotted lines over, and this is how a perfectly competitive firm would find their wage. So think about this. If you're a worker, okay, this wage right here, you can label one of 2 things or both. Your supply of labor or your marginal factor cost. And so one thing I've always told my students, when you get asked a question to define, so if on the AP test they said, define marginal factor cost, easy tip for you, use the word additional twice. So factor is a factor of production. You are labor. You know what cost is, and you know marginal is additional. So instead of saying marginal factor cost is the additional factor cost, right? No, it's the additional cost to hire 1 additional worker, okay? Keep it kind of simple form. So the marginal factor cost is each worker I hire. Why is it perfectly elastic? Because look at the bottom. In a perfectly competitive labor market, each firm is a wage taker. These firms, so think about you and I. We are wage takers at the end of the day. When I sat down and got hired as a teacher, they slid a piece of paper across the table and said, this is what we're offering. I couldn't say, I'll tell you what, I'll work as many hours, I'll work 30 hours per week at that wage, but then you're going to pay me more for the next 5 hours, and then even more for the next 5 hours, and even more for the next 5 and the next 5. That's not how things work, right? You get slid across the wage and they say, this is what we're offering. And don't worry about negotiating. That's not what we're talking about. You're a wage taker. How is that wage found in the marketplace? Sometimes there's a lot of inefficiencies with this. You can see what's happening right now. There's a tremendous amount of inefficiency in the marketplace because certain sectors don't know what to pay people. So for right now, let's keep this simple. In the market, the wage is set. Make your dotted lines over. This becomes your wage. And then once again, your demand for labor, but let's not call it D for labor today. Demand for labor, let's call it MRP. Okay, and we're going to go, and I'm going to go through and give you all these notes, exactly what the stuff means. So hopefully you've had time to draw this, right? You got your X, dotted lines, your supply of labor, demand for labor, once again, equilibrium. This is a quantity the firm hires. Perfect. We can go back to this. And firms are wage takers, okay? We're wage takers. So let's now go to some notes. We're going to go through some free response before we get to the second main thing today. This is a perfectly competitive factor market, okay? So if I just told you guys that the demand for labor is going to be called marginal revenue product, MRP, then what on earth, what the heck is this MRP stuff? So M, you can figure it out, marginal, because everything, right, in micro is marginal. So marginal revenue product. So marginal revenue product is the marginal revenue by the addition created by the addition of one unit of a resource. So if I hire one more person, it's the total revenue, the additional revenue that person will make me. So think about this for a minute. Let's say, you guys ever heard of Jiffy? It's corn mix. So the only Jiffy factory in the world, believe it or not, everyone thinks it's a Southern thing because every Southern cookbook, if you open them up, will say like, use Jiffy cornbread. It's the only factory in the world is here in Chelsea, Michigan, where I teach. Wonderful family that owns it. It's a huge, huge factory, and they make Jiffy. I mean, the thing's 24/7, right? It's just spitting out there. Those little boxes of blue Jiffy. And would they hire someone if they paid the person $20 an hour, but the person made them $25 an hour? That's their marginal revenue product. At the margin, the person's going to make them 25. That would be a good deal for Jiffy, right? And what should they do? Now, you guys are smart. You're teachers. You're some wonderful teachers. And back when you guys did cost curves, they talked to you the original about marginal cost and marginal revenue. And they probably went around the room and said, if the margin cost me this much, but my revenue is this much, would I do such and such? And you probably said yes. And they said, you continue doing that until it equals and you stop, right? And marginal benefit, marginal cost. So Jiffy then hires another worker because you wouldn't want to leave profit on the table. And if the next additional worker makes him 22 and they pay him 20, good. If the next worker makes him 20 and they pay him 20, good. And then they should stop. Because the next worker, because of diminishing returns, probably only makes them 18. You don't want to pay someone 20 if they're only making you 18. So that's what marginal revenue product is. And number two, marginal revenue product is going to be the demand for labor. So on your graph, you're going to label demand for labor as MRP, okay? So that's number one. Number two, and then number three, in an imperfectly competitive market, if you had to find it, it's the marginal product times marginal revenue. Now, what is marginal product? Well, you guys probably got here already when your teachers taught you some of this cost stuff, right? And they probably had a total product with a column, and marginal product is just the difference in between each, right? So when you're getting your marginal product, say I make 10 hats and I hire the next worker and they make, so one person makes 10 hats, I hire two workers together, they make 25. Then when I hired the second worker, my marginal product was the difference, 25 minus 10. So one person makes me 10 hats, two people makes me 25 hats, therefore the second worker, the marginal product was 15, right? You guys know how to do it. So you take your marginal revenue, you multiply it times marginal product, and it gets you your marginal revenue product. For the most part on the AP test, what you'll see on the free response is they usually use perfectly competitive markets. So in a perfectly competitive market, it's marginal product times price. And this is also, you might see this term, write it down. You might see what's known as the value of marginal product of labor. Okay, it's our marginal revenue product. So marginal product times price. Remember that, that's important. And that's how you get your marginal revenue product. My marginal revenue product is now my demand for labor. So now this should start making sense. So I'm a business and I'm Jiffy and I'm looking at hiring workers, and I realize that if I hire the next worker, they can make me $22, then I'm willing to give them up to $22, but I can't give them more because now I'd be losing money by hiring that worker. That doesn't make sense. So marginal product times the price equals my marginal revenue product. So how many boxes of Jiffy is that worker going to make times how much I'm going to sell them for, the price, gets me my marginal revenue product. And do you guys think firms know this? Sure. Now they probably don't have a chart behind them in their office It says if I hire one busboy at this restaurant, their marginal revenue product is this much, right? Because you need busboys. You guys have been to restaurants, and if they're poorly staffed and your dishes stack up on the table and your appetizer plates are in the way, they can't set the salad down right, people don't come back, or they can't serve as much food. You have a good body and everything's clean, right? So what's happening is they're getting people out of the restaurant faster. I mean, think of restaurants, right? I read a great economic article once. Don't think of them as places to eat food, right? What are they doing? They're renting space. That's all they're doing. If you're a restaurant or you're renting chairs to people, people need to eat. They need to eat fast, spend a lot of money and leave and get the next people. And there's nothing worse than people come in and drink coffee for 2 hours, right? We know that firms don't have an exact number of what that busboy brings in, but they kind of know. They've done this long enough. That's your marginal revenue product. And then if this is important, make sure you guys know this. This is a perfect example of something that can be asked on a free response. Talk to us about why your MRP falls, and it's due to diminishing marginal product, which each worker makes less than the previous worker due to diminishing marginal returns. This is the second time in the last week we've talked about diminishing marginal returns. And the example I used for you guys was your teacher might have had you, there's so many different ways to show this that are out there, but they might have had you race tennis balls between two buckets, or cut and paste something at their desk, right? And the idea of diminishing marginal returns is that each additional worker makes less than the previous worker, because if at least, you have variable inputs, if one of them's fixed, you're going to suffer from diminishing returns. We're going to go through this. So don't sit here like, oh, he's giving us all these terms. We're going to go back over diminishing returns here in a couple of weeks when we get to, I think, Unit 4. But you guys should remember diminishing marginal returns. The idea that each worker you hire is going to make less than the previous worker. So in essence, your costs are being driven up, okay? So each worker, if your marginal product times price gets you your MRP, and if your marginal product is falling, then MRP is falling. And remember, in a perfectly competitive output firm, your price is constant. So MP is falling, your price is constant, then MRP must be falling. So I hope that makes sense for you guys. That's why your demand curve for labor, right, is going to be downward sloping as to whichever way it looks on your iPad there, your computer. So, and then the last thing is, where do you hire? Look, this is about the probably 8,000th time you've heard in micro. You do anything where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, correct? Efficiency, your equilibrium. So what are we doing? Same thing. You hire where your marginal revenue product hits your marginal factor cost. Any perfectly competitive firm, remember, that's your wage, okay? So far, you have a downward sloping demand, you have a constant wage, and I'm going to hire where they equal each other. And I know there's confusion from kids who say, like, I don't understand why I would hire someone and pay them $10 an hour if that's exactly what they make me. And you're forgetting that things are at the margin. So if I hire the fifth worker and the fifth worker makes me 10, and I'd be willing to pay him 10, and I'm okay with that because the fourth worker makes me 11. And if I don't hire the fifth worker, that extra dollar between the 11 and the 10, I'm leaving that on the table. Everything's at the margin. It's the in between the workers. So understand that. It's kind of an important concept to understand. A lot of times people kind of mess that up a little bit. So I just threw a lot at you. So here's what I want. Let's do a free response together. Let me walk you through exactly what you might see here in 5-6 weeks. All right, Petzl Corporation, profit maximizing monopolist. Okay, you guys probably remember how to draw monopoly. It sells a patented rabies vaccine. So remember, they don't have to say it's monopolist. If they say things like their patents or their barriers to entry, you know immediately it's a monopoly, right? Perfectly competitive. Wheat farmers don't have patents on growing wheat. I could jump in and grow wheat in my backyard, okay? And yes, that's with a T. So draw a correct labeled graph that shows a monopoly. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do this with you guys. Let's get over to this better camera so you don't have to look at me. There we go. Label this Petzl, okay? Oops, let's do this. Okay. So go ahead and start drawing your monopoly graph there. Okay, so correct label graph that shows the output and price. Okay, so demand, marginal revenue. We talked the last couple of days about why this is below it. Marginal cost. And it says output in the price. So once again, MC hits MR. So where the monopolist sets your quantity, go up to your demand curve for price, label this P, and area of economic profits. So let's put our average total cost, make sure that goes through the bottom. Marginal cost always goes through the bottom. Okay, I'll give you a sports analogy when we get there of why that is in fact correct always. And stay on this line till it's average total cost, go over. And here is, I think it said shade, and it said shade in your profits, or show shade, yeah, whatever you want to do. And here it is, right? So here's your price, here's where it's average total cost, here's your quantity. So there we go. I'm shading in my profit box, okay? So far, quick review, right? Kind of went through that rather quickly because I expect you guys probably know that. B, assume they hire the production workers in a perfectly competitive labor market at a wage rate of $20 an hour. Set the marginal conditions. Okay, once again, they're not asking you to define. They're asking you to state the marginal conditions. One of the things really trying to get you guys, and all the teachers who are doing, all these wonderful teachers who are out here doing the AP stuff on this YouTube, one of the things they're trying to do is get you guys to learn the skills that you're going to need to take this AP test. And one of them, of course, is what are they asking? What do they want me to do? So when they say state the conditions, we don't need some long definition. What do you want to write down? It's where marginal revenue product equals your marginal factor cost. And if you wrote down it's where your marginal revenue equals your product equals your wage, they would have accepted that as well. And then B2 says, draw a correctly labeled graph that shows the labor supply and labor demand for Petzl. So remember, you are not drawing a market graph. You're now drawing a firm graph. Indicate the profit maximizing quantity. So for B, it would look just like this, right? Quantity of labor. Write this out on your AP test if you had to. Wage rate. Demand for labor. Remember, we just got done saying that's your marginal revenue product. And your supply of labor. There you go. And quantity. Let's label this QL. Boom. Easy stuff. Yes, that's a Q. Yes, that's an L. I'm well aware of I have a lot of failings. That's one of the big ones. And wage over here. And there we go. Okay. So there'll be some points for you guys. So far, probably you're doing well. C, suppose the market wage rate. By the way, if they do give you a number, it's always helpful to make sure you put that number over here. Instead of wage, really should have put, maybe equals $20 or just put $20. And then it says, suppose the wage rate falls to 15, show on your diagram how, so they want you to go back to this graph and show what's going to happen. Okay, so if the supply is set in the market at 20 and it falls, all you're doing is this, right? You're just drawing a new supply of labor. Use an arrow, let the reader know exactly what's going on. Label this 15. Maybe I put an arrow here. And then it says the amount of labor they would hire. Boom, look at this, right? Quantity is increased. Make a Q there. I know that's getting in the way, but that's okay. Okay, I would clean that up, certainly. But here's my new quantity Q prime way out there. And would this happen? Would firms be willing to hire more people at a lower wage? Well, yes, of course they would. And then D, given the lower wage rate, indicate how each of the following would change. The total fixed cost. Okay, this goes back to what we talked about yesterday. Wages are a variable cost, right? Because if I'm going to pay someone $10 an hour, it depends how many hours I'm giving them. So it's a big variable cost. So total fixed costs don't change. Wages are a variable cost and wages affect marginal cost. So I know my marginal cost, if the wage fell, my marginal cost would fall. And what would happen to the price of the product? All right, well, let's go back up to this graph real quick. Don't draw this, they didn't want you to, but if my marginal cost fell, let me draw it on mine and show you exactly what happened. Now it hits out here. And if I make my dotted lines up and made over, look what happened. The price fell for consumers, right? The price fell. So my price, which was here originally, is now here, down here. Okay. So far, hopefully so good. Hopefully you guys got that. And then one more to do. Here we go. All right. Now, this is something, excuse me, you could certainly see on a free response. They really like questions like these. The first thing you guys need to do, because you can't do this on the computer, so go ahead, make your new columns real quick. Number of workers, number of cars washed, okay, just put number of cars, doesn't matter. Marginal product, marginal revenue product. And so we got 0 up to 6. This is the old Sparkle car wash, kind of a great name for a car wash. 15, 35, 60, 75, 85, and 80. Okay, so our marginal product, remember, right? When you're looking to do this kind of thing, it is the difference. So if I hire, right, if I don't hire any workers, I can't wash cars. Hire the first worker, they make me 15, okay? So my marginal product, 15. And then, oops, my second worker, I went from 15 to 35. So far, so good. 20. And then it went up 25. And hopefully I don't do any bad math because that would be very embarrassing. And then, can you have negative marginal product? Absolutely you can. Okay, you can. So here's a marginal product. So far, that's all you guys have to do. Okay, let's keep this simple. So now that I have my columns done, now I can go back and answer the questions. So A, with which worker is marginal product maximized? Well, all you have to do is look and say, where's the biggest number in this column right here? Look, the third worker, 25. And then B, identify and define the economic principle that explains why marginal product eventually decreases. So once again, diminishing marginal returns. And remember what we talked about, okay? The definition, when you talk about diminishing marginal returns, you have to use fixed inputs and variable inputs. And you have to talk about the fact that if you have variable inputs, but one of them is held fixed, that your output is going to increase at a decreasing rate. So I'll say that again. If at least one input is held fixed, while other inputs are variable, output increases at a decreasing rate. That's a really good definition you guys can use. And then C, explain why they would never hire the sixth worker. Well, look, why would you hire the sixth worker? They make less when you're the sixth worker in the fifth. Why? I don't know. There was no room for them to stand behind the machine, and they kept bumping into and knocking stuff out of the other person's hands. Okay, I think it's something like that. And then D, Sparkle charges $6 for a car wash. What is the maximum daily wage Sparkle would be willing to pay the fourth worker? Well, so there's something you can do here, which is which worker? Sorry, they ask about the fourth worker. Okay, so all you have to figure out is your marginal revenue product for the fourth worker, right? Because that's the maximum they'd be willing to pay. So $6 and 15 times 6, last time I checked, is 90. And so the 90 I got was because my marginal product times price equals my marginal revenue product. And they're willing to pay what the additional revenue that worker can make. So they're selling it for 6. They're making me 15 car washes. That makes sense. So $90. Okay. So I wanted to show you both of those. So you got two different looks at exactly what type of thing when you deal with labor graphs. So that's number one so far today, right? That's number one. Let's go back now to our PowerPoint. All right, so that's Sparkle. And then next, the least cost rule. Very important. Before I teach this to you, your teachers, back when you guys were learning about demand and diminishing margin utility, okay, probably right before you did supply and demand, one of the things they taught you was margin utility divided by price of one good has to equal your margin utility divided by the price of the other good. And what your teachers probably said was something along the lines of, you guys have been using a tremendous amount of economics in your life without ever realizing it. So you have a donut, right? A good Krispy Kreme, good donut, in a cup of coffee, okay? And you're sitting there drinking your cup of coffee, and you spent, we don't care on the price, $3 and the donut was $1, whatever, it doesn't matter, right? So which one do you consume first? Well, it depends. Whichever gives you more margin utility per dollar spent. So maybe I only buy one coffee, but maybe I buy 2 donuts. But If I only have $5, I have to start thinking about which one's going to give me more margin utility per dollar. And if you remember your teacher teaching you that, good, because now it's going to be really easy to understand this. So the least cost rule is when firms now have a choice to hire us or capital, i.e. the robots are coming for our jobs. So I wouldn't worry a tremendous amount about this, by the way. I think you guys are going to be just fine. There's going to be a lot of jobs out there, right? If you go back to the, England in the late 1800s and, thinking that when the Industrial Revolution, all these factories thinking that it was doom and gloom, they're all going to lose their jobs. Well, that didn't actually quite happen. So I think we're going to be all right, but I think some of you will be working alongside with some AI. So firms must decide whether to hire labor or capital. And once they find a marginal product, they have to know the wage, right, that they would pay that worker, and then how much it would cost to rent the capital per hour. Okay, that's what we call it, the rental price of that capital. So if you look at the picture here, right, I live in Michigan. We have all the auto industry up here. Ford must decide. So there's a wonderful tour if you're ever in the Detroit area, the Henry Ford Museum. And you can go into an actual Ford, they make the Ford F-150s at the Rouge factory, which used to be like 100,000 people a day back in the 50s and 60s worked at that place. Massive factory. Nowhere near that many workers today. Why? It's not that they're not producing cars and trucks, it's because they have so much automation. So you have workers who work in the factory alongside robots. So like when the windshield, they don't want me to work there and touch it with my, fingerprints and maybe drop it and all that. So a robot, suction cups get it, and they spin around, and they put it right on the truck. And what they've done is they've done the math. How many windshields? What's our marginal product per hour? How much are we paying? How much could a human do? How much are we paying? And whichever one is a higher number, you're going to keep hiring that. And the robots have us. We can't do windshield installations as fast as a robot, most likely. So the formula, and here's what I want you guys to do. Write this down, but the lettering didn't look very good. It's the marginal product of labor divided by the price of labor. Now, you guys are smart. What's the price of labor? Wage. That's the price of labor, right? My wage. So marginal product of labor over the wage has to equal the marginal product of capital divided by the price of capital. I am well aware capital does not start with a K, but C was already taken in econ. So they use K for capital. It's an easy way to keep that. So if you don't write this last part down, right? Let's do this together. I did it here on the right-hand side. You own a business. You can hire a worker, $20 an hour, rent a robot, okay? The worker, so you're going to pay the worker 20. You're going to pay for a robot $50 an hour, okay? And the marginal product of labor is 20, and the marginal product of the robot is 200. So let's look over here real quick. So marginal product of labor, 20, divided by the price of labor, $20, equals 1. Marginal product of capital, divided by 200, divided by the price, 50, is 4. So here's the question. It's basic math, right? And all those times your teachers gave you free response, and some of you, this would never happen with my students, of course, they would never say something like, can we please use a calculator? This math is so hard. I don't know how to divide things. And the answer's always been no. Well, this year, what do you think? The College Board is going to stand next to you when you don't use a calculator? Of course, we can't stop you from using calculators and notes and things like that. So my guess is the math isn't going to be real tricky because it's never been real tricky. But this math you can all do. 20 divided by 50 and 20 divided by, or excuse me, 200 divided by. So now, which one? Here's the key. You did the math. You got it. What do you hire? And the answer is you hire the one with the higher number because you're getting more marginal product per dollar. That's why we call this the least cost rule. If you struggle with this idea, when we get to marginal utility, I'll give you a good example of this, but you shouldn't struggle with this. Whichever is giving you a higher benefit per dollar, marginal product per dollar, you got to use that one more. And that's how businesses decide whether or not to hire automation. So if you guys think that business owners just flip a coin someday and say, I was thinking about some pretty robots in my factory, of course not. It's all driven by this least cost rule. So marginal product of labor divided by the price of labor has to equal the marginal product of capital divided by the price of capital. If they don't equal each other, you continue using whichever one has a higher number, and then diminishing marginal returns. Eventually, you'll get less and less and less until they equal each other, and then maybe you stay with the number of workers and things like that. Okay, on the AP test, so here you go. I'm going to give you a real easy one today. If you look at this and say I can't do the math, yes you can. So marginal product of labor is 30, and the price of labor is 1,000. So 30 over 1,000, and then the marginal product of capital is 90, and the price capital is 3,000. So if you say you actually expect me to do this math, well, you guys, all they did, right, was they tripled each number, right? So everything stayed. What did it stay? It stayed the exact same. So what should they do? Well, if you do the math, you're going to have the exact same answer. So the answer is E. You don't change the mix of the inputs at all. Everything's exactly correct. Now, if any of these numbers change, that would give you a different answer. Okay. So least cost rule. We good? We can move on. All right. Let's do another free response together. And then I'm going to teach you about something that is called monopsonies, which some people are like, you know, what on earth are you talking about? But they're supposedly real things. So let's do a monopsony question here. And so if you're watching this non-live, go ahead and pause it if you want, so you can take a couple minutes. For you guys who are with me today, and thank you for watching live. So here we go. XYZ Corporation, okay? Profit maximizing firm, hires labor in a perfectly competitive labor market, sells its product in a perfectly competitive output. A, defining marginal revenue product of labor. All right, so this is one of those definitions. And remember my tip, they ask you a definition and it's marginal, use additional twice. So it's the additional revenue from hiring an additional worker, right? It's the additional revenue from hiring each additional worker. Perfect, or unit of labor, if you want to sound really fancy. B, the side-by-side graphs show each of the following. So now, once again, they're asking about perfectly competitive labor market. This is what we started with 31 minutes ago. So here we go. Let's show you now exactly what they want you to do, okay? So go ahead and draw your side-by-side graphs. For the sake of time, I'm not going to label all these. Wage rate, quantity of labor, supply, demand. These are markets. W, quantity of labor, okay? Make your dotted lines over. This becomes your wage. We also call this our supply of labor and our marginal factor cost. Wage, downward sloping demand for labor. We call this our marginal revenue product, MRP, quantity of labor, wage rate as well, okay? And then the quantity is where MR hits MC, right? MFC hits MRP, quantity of labor. So in the market, they're going to hire this many workers. Each firm is going to hire this many workers. So far, so good. C. The company develops a new technology that increases labor productivity. Currently, this technology is not available to any other firm. So what's this going to do? Okay, so here's the key. If you think about this graph, right? Does that affect the supply or demand for labor? Well, if workers get more productive, it doesn't mean that workers multiply and it's going to change the supply of labor. What it does is it increases the MRP, each worker, right? Why is that? Think about MRP is MP times price. If your marginal product goes up because you're more productive, you make more car washes per day, more boxes of Jiffy per day, then our MRP is going to shift to the right. Now, they didn't ask us to draw it. They just said, what's going to happen to employment? Look, if it's out here now, you make your dotted lines down. So you would say employment increases due to an increase in MRP. And then what about the wage? Well, the wage is constant. That was found out in the marketplace. This firm isn't going to adjust that on their own. That's found out in the marketplace. And so the wage remains constant. You guys feel all right with that? Somewhat confident? I know we're speeding through. There's a lot of stuff with labor graphs. I really hope your teachers started hitting this right before you guys got excused. If not, the last 2 days, we've given you everything that you're going to need to know for this, except for the very last thing. Okay, so let's go to monopsonies. And yes, it's a real word, right? So what is a monopoly, right? Monopoly, a market with one seller. So a monopsony is a market with one buyer. So First thing, you have to know what it is. A monopsony is a market with one buyer. And if this graph looks kind of weird, it should. Think about the monopolies, right? Why is your demand higher than your marginal revenue? Because in order to increase output, the monopolist must lower the price on all units. I'm going to take that and flip it upside down. Okay, so bear with me, stick with me here, promise. I'm going to get you through this. Go ahead and draw this graph. Instead of me drawing it, I did it on this because obviously it looks a little better. The curve should touch there at the bottom. That's a mistake on my part. Your marginal factor cost and your supply of labor, because if you only hire the first worker, they're gonna be the exact same. So make sure these touch. All right, so you have now, once again, downward sloping demand curve, marginal revenue product. Okay, if you put D equals, no problem. Wage rate, quantity of labor. An upwards sloping supply of labor. We haven't seen that yet in the labor graph, right? We said the market set our wage. Now, a monopsony is different. It's a market with a buyer. What are they buying? They're buying labor. So I always say, like, think about if you're a nurse or, and you're up in possibly the UP of Michigan. Maybe you're in Wyoming or the Dakotas, and maybe there really is a hospital every 50 miles, 80 miles away, type of thing. Then in order to entice people up there, a lot of times you have to offer higher wages to get people to come in. Okay. Now, if I'm sitting in the break room and I get $12 an hour, and the nurse that I'm having lunch with says, well, they just hired me, I earned 16. I'm probably not going to be happy with that. So now what do they have to do? They have to go back and offer me 16. So what is that doing? It's driving the marginal factor cost up to hire additional workers. What is the marginal factor cost? The additional cost to hire each additional worker, right? So that's why. So in a normal marketplace, a perfectly competitive market, you would hire PM and QM, okay? That is the price and quantity in a perfectly competitive market. Believe it or not, the NBA is considered kind of a monopsony, because if you are a professional basketball player and you want to go pro, there's really only one league. Now, some people out there say, well, that's changed today. The Mideast is spending a lot of money. A lot of people are going to Israel to play basketball. I think that Australia has a smaller league. China's paying money for people to come over and play basketball. But if you want to make the big bucks and play in the grand stage with LeBron and everyone, then what do? You play at the NBA. Watch what I'm going to show you, because I might argue that NBA players are underpaid. And some of you are saying, I don't know if I can follow this logic, but watch. So in a normal marketplace, okay, the wage should be WM, right? I use price as a price of labor, but it's really a wage over here, the wage in the monopsony. But what do we always want to do? We always want to go on our graphs where marginal cost, it's marginal revenue, marginal factor cost, marginal revenue product. So let's do that. Let's go here, make our new equilibrium go down, label this, I just labeled it for this QMON, quantity of a monopsony. So what's going to happen? The monopsony is going to hire fewer workers. Is this so much controversial? It is. Okay, it is. But potentially, would a small hospital out in the middle of nowhere have fewer nurses than a hospital somewhere where there's like way more competition and everything else and way more people? Yeah, okay. Potentially, yes, they would hire, and maybe they just make them work a little more, or more days, longer shifts, things like that, okay? And then, what does the supply of labor tell us? Supply of labor tells us that this wage down here, this many workers willing to work, and as you raise the wage, more people want to work. So at this quantity, okay, we're not going to put a number to it. If you go up your supply of labor, those people are willing to work for this wage, so guess what? You pay them that wage. That's what they're willing to work for. So what happens is the wage, the price of labor, falls in a monopsony. So in a monopsony, QMON and then W or PMON. So in a monopsony, you hire fewer workers at a lower wage. So do you think a nurse in a small town in South Dakota might get, and there's one hospital and it operates and there's like 9 towns around it. Do you think, or Warsaw, New York, you're a nurse in Warsaw, potentially you get paid less per hour than if you were a nurse at Strong Hospital in Rochester, or one of the larger hospitals in Buffalo, New York? Probably. right? Probably you do. Do you potentially hire fewer nurses? Potentially you do that as well, okay? It is controversial, but that's what you're looking at. I want to make sure you guys saw monopsony. Certainly is something that could be asked. It's on your labor unit 5.4 there. So that's what a monopsony graph looks like. You can hire fewer workers. And now, why is this? It's competition for labor. If I'm the only hospital within 50 miles, if you don't want to be a nurse in my hospital, do you really want to take an 80-mile one-way commute to earn a few dollars more? No. But if you live in a town like Madison, Wisconsin, where they might have 2 hospitals serving Madison, now there's competition for labor. And anytime there's competition for services, demand begins increasing and now wages increase. So that's what a monopsony is. So last thing I want to do with you guys today is give you some homework. Then we're going to get you out of here. I know it's a longer day, but boy, oh boy, it's today a lot of information. So you have 2 things. The first one, here it is. So you have your market, your firm, and I'm not going to do this one with you guys, right? So you're going to have to go back, press pause. We don't have enough time to sit here and do it today. So you guys can just kind of do this on your own. But you have the market. It says, what type of labor market does the firm hire its workers? Well, that's kind of a gimme. Assume the productivity of workers increases. What will happen in the short run? Demand for labor, wage rate. I just did this, right? So you guys should be familiar with that. Suppose a firm only produces good X, price of good Y is substitutes. Oh, this is great review for you guys, right? We're now talking about supply and demand of substitute goods. And then what will happen to the optimal quantity of labor? So boy, this is like a 3-stepper. You got to think about what's going to happen in that market. Then what will happen to the good for the market for the other good? And then what's that going to do for labor? These are outstanding questions. And then D, if it were a monopsony, would the monopsonist hire more or fewer or the same number of workers? Perfect, easy stuff. You guys are getting it. Last thing for today. So please do that tomorrow. We're going to take about 10 minutes going, because I really want to hammer this labor market stuff with you guys, because this is the last time we're going to do Unit 5 review until the very end of the month, where if you guys, I think the calendar will be published out, because I know tomorrow's a big day. I'm going to take a few minutes tomorrow and talk to you guys about exactly what this test is going to look like tomorrow, I think at noon. Mr. Packer is going to release all the information to you guys on the College Board. So you guys will have more details, because I know there's some detail out there. I am overwhelmed with the amount of thought that has gone into this and security. It's awesome. I think they've done a fantastic job getting this test ready for you guys. So tomorrow we're going to take comments to talk about that, but I really want to spend about 10 minutes finishing this. So please do this one here. And then if you could click on the link, hopefully it works. If not, Google the 2011 Form B, question number 3. So we're going to do those 2 to start tomorrow. And don't worry, this is the only day I'm going to give you 2 free response questions. So please do them. You have some time out there. Turn off Tiger King, Tiger Cat. Joe, yeah, that was bizarre. That was fantastic. So if you haven't seen that, I don't know what you're waiting for. Boy, whew, we can spend an hour talking about that tomorrow. So anyways, once again, public service announcement, really trying to shore this up, finish this. So cb.org/tech, if you know people out there who need some equipment or some help getting online, remember, you can use your phones on these things. You guys can type away on your phones, craziness. So once again, truly, thank you for showing up today. Hope you got something out of this. Hope you got a lot out of today, actually, because it's a big day. If you need to go back and go through and look over your notes, should make a little bit of sense, and then a little more sense, hopefully. And thanks for watching. Please join us again tomorrow at 3 o'clock, where we will finish our discussion of labor markets and then get to talk all about scarcity and economic questions and opportunity cost. And be sure to do those practice questions, make your teachers happy. And I'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy your afternoon.